Hey, what is up guys? Murgaman4 here, and so soon it's time to say goodbye to the 14th Doctor. This is a really interesting, unique situation to have this really short mini era, I guess. And on the one hand, it does feel weird to be saying goodbye to a new Doctor so soon, but on the other hand, it doesn't, because obviously David Tennant has been the Doctor before, so this feels more like a second goodbye, which it kinda is. And because of that, it gives Russell T Davies a bit more of an excuse to play around with regeneration in ways we haven't seen before. This is not a traditional handing over from the predecessor to the new Doctor in any sense of the word, and I'll get into that a bit later. Even then, there's a lot going on in this episode, so why don't we just start from the beginning and talk about the Giggle itself. It's a really neat idea to utilize the ventriloquist dummy Stooky Bill, the first face ever seen on television, because as RTD rightly says, it is quite creepy. And while the doll itself doesn't play a massive role in the episode, it does set up everything to come, as well as the origins of the doll, introducing us, or reintroducing us, I should say, to the Toymaker, now played by Neil Patrick Harris. And right off the bat, I have to say, what a phenomenal performance Harris gives. It's such perfect casting. He utterly nails it right out the gate. Really engaging and creepy and fun all at once. It's inspired casting, and while the Toymaker feels like too big of a villain to use very frequently, indeed it's been 57 years since his last on-screen appearance, I would gladly welcome Neil Patrick Harris back in the role in future. Anyway, before we get too much into the Toymaker, let's jump back to 2023, picking up where Wild Blue Yonder left off, where absolutely everyone is going mad, thinking their opinion is the only right one, and this offers up a lot of opportunity for some great social commentary. RTD really doesn't hold back. It's incredibly unsubtle, and I love once we get to Unit and they're trying to showcase exactly what's going on to the Doctor. We see Kate remove her little Zedex band that's protecting her from the effects of the Giggle, and she just gets really defensive and antagonistic towards the Doctor, an alien in their midst, the two redheads, Donna and Mel, saying there's some sort of conspiracy. Ruth Madeley's Shirley Ann Bingham, who is of course in a wheelchair. Kate starts getting all crazy about the fact that she's seen her use her legs before, and it's just a really great, completely unsettled commentary on those anti-vax types that have risen up over the last few years, whose voices have gotten louder and louder on the internet. And frankly, this is the kind of thing that could really sustain an entire episode, and I'm almost disappointed it didn't, because the Giggle itself is pretty much forgotten about after this point. Once the Doctor goes to confront the Toymaker, it isn't really brought up again. It's effectively just a background element, and we never cut back to the ground level to see how it's affecting the people. We never really find out how it gets resolved. It's implied, of course, that once the Toymaker is defeated, that it all just reverses, but we never get to see the effects of that. So I think that is a real shame, because what we do see of that angle is really, really good, and no doubt going to piss off a certain group of people. But yeah, anyone hoping that RTD was going to come back and stop Doctor Who from being political like it was under the Chibnall years, yeah, good luck with that. Speaking of Unit, I briefly mentioned Mel, who's now working with them after her brief cameo in The Power of the Doctor, and it is nice to see her again. Admittedly, she doesn't get a lot to do, and I suspect this is more just, we know she's coming back with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, and I suspect this was just more for setting her up for that, because honestly, her role is largely disposable. But I always enjoy seeing old companions come back, and I don't feel like it really detracts from anything or takes up unnecessary space, so I am glad she's here. Just don't really have a whole lot to say about her. Although I am wondering if it's going to become an important point later on that she was present for the Doctor's bigeneration, but I guess we'll see on that. Of course, the big focus of the episode is indeed on the Toymaker himself, and I've always loved the Toymaker. He has always been one of my favorite Doctor Who villains, and I've always wanted to see him come back, and I'm so glad that RTD has finally done that. He has, of course, also had some stories in expanded media, and I've largely enjoyed those as well. Solitaire, in particular, from Big Finish, is my all-time favorite Eighth Doctor story. It is so good. And while this episode understandably pretty much ignores expanded media, it maintains what I love about the Toymaker so much, which is that just that grandness, that lack of being bound by any sort of rules. And Russell T Davies does a fantastic job of demonstrating that, how literally the only way that you can fight back against the Toymaker is play his games, because he always plays by the rules of the games. But everything else, he is capable of literally anything, turning bullets into flowers, people into bouncing balls, which we see in this fantastic sequence where he sings to Spice Up Your Life, which is just a huge amount of fun, and also is just such a great demonstration of his power, as well as just how scared and terrified the Doctor is of him, because he recognizes that there's nothing you can really do to fight him. He is this all-powerful being with no real weaknesses. It really does just come down to play his games or lose. And these kinds of otherworldly beings, ones that don't play by the rules, have always been one of my favorite kinds of Doctor Who stories. And it seems we're going to be getting more of that. Of course, there's a hint near the end that the Toymaker's legions are coming, and RTD has confirmed that there are going to be some more out there Doctor Who stories that don't necessarily play by the rules that have been established. And even just in these few specials so far, I really think that RTD has come back with a vengeance, saying there are no rules, trying to break down the walls of so-called canon, and basically trying to say anything is possible. And the Toymaker is a great villain to represent that. He also takes the opportunity to taunt the Doctor with this fun little puppet show, showing Donna what happened after she left, the semi-deaths of Amy, Clara, and Bill, as well as the devastation of the Flux. And this is just the kind of thing, the Spice Up Your Life dance sequence, you can't do that with any other villain. It's just such a fun and unique way of telling this kind of story that really sets it apart. And indeed, the resolution to the story is the Doctor wins a game of catch. You could not do that with any other villain. It's so brilliantly simple, but it's really effective, and that's what I love the Toymaker for. Just endless possibilities. Like I said, he's probably too powerful to have around too frequently, but there's so much you can do with the Toymaker that I really hope he does come back at some point. Though again, his legions are apparently coming, so we'll probably be getting some more of that kind of stuff with them. Now, it's probably time I talk about the regeneration itself, which, as I said, is far from traditional. This time, we get a bi-generation. And unfortunately, I knew about this going in. I think a lot of fans did, because it leaked quite early on and spread quite far. So if you were online in fan communities, you probably knew it was coming. And I will say, I liked it a lot more than I expected to, based off of the leak. I do still have my issues with it, although the bi-regeneration itself of the Doctor splitting into two and the old incarnation not leaving, I didn't mind that as much. I will mind it if it becomes a permanent thing going forward, and RTD suggested in his head this retroactively happened to all other Doctors. I don't like that. As a one-off thing, I think it's pretty cool, especially with the fact that this is a returning face, and this particular incarnation up to this point has really only lived a couple of days. Like, that is exceptionally short. David Tennant's really drawn the short straw in terms of his incarnations lifespans. But I think it's a great twist on the standard regeneration story to have the new Doctor finishing the fight for the old Doctor. And while I don't think you needed to do the bi-regeneration to do that, you don't need two Doctors to win a game of catch. It is a lot of fun seeing Tennant and Gatwa interacting with each other and being able to have an actual on-screen passing of the baton, so to speak, which you obviously don't get because the old actor disappears when the new actor comes in, usually. And again, I think it's David Tennant being back in the role that also allows this to feel a bit more natural, because he's already had a goodbye. This is his second goodbye, so it doesn't really feel like it's upstaging his Doctor's final moments, because he's already returned. Actually, if anything, there has been some concern about this being David Tennant overshadowing Ncuti Gatwa in his first moments, and while that was a concern of mine going in, I feel like on screen it played out fairly well. They're definitely treated as equals, and the 15th Doctor is treated as the more mature one, comforting the 14th Doctor and encouraging him to take some time out to heal himself. There is a little bit of weirdness going on here as well, because it's not entirely clear on screen whether this is the current timeline and the future timeline converging, or if this is an actual split and 14 is now his own separate timeline. Because that's the way it appears on screen, but then there's also a couple lines like the 15th Doctor saying that he's okay because the 14th Doctor heals himself. I do admittedly like this better if it is kind of a time loop situation and it's 15 coming back from the future, because I don't really like the idea of there being, a whole bunch of other Doctors all around at the same time. I mean, I know it's kind of like that anyway with time travel, but it's different if you have, for example, one Doctor that's permanently stationed on Earth and then another Doctor that's elsewhere in the universe. It, to me, makes the Doctor Who universe feel a little bit smaller and a little bit safer, because if there's a Doctor who's always on Earth, it means that the current Doctor never really has to worry about Earth, because there's always a Doctor there to deal with the stuff when he's gone. It doesn't allow for situations like Torchwood's Children of Earth, for example. Now, I mean, obviously, we have had in the past John Pertwee's Doctor exiled to Earth, but that's also a bit of a different situation, because he did have periods where he disappeared, where Earth could have been in danger. And yeah, I just don't like the idea of a second Doctor being around on a permanent basis. On that point as well, the other thing I'm not really a fan of when it comes to this is the fact that this is incredibly reductive of what RTD did the first time around in Journey's End. You have a weird kind of regeneration where a separate incarnation played by David Tennant splits off from the main incarnation and settles down with one of his companions. And I don't know, it's just that repetitiveness feels weird to me. I already am not a huge fan of the idea of the Doctor settling down. It's obviously acknowledged in the story that the Doctor, that's the kind of life he normally can't have. But it's not just because he's too busy. He's busy because that's the kind of life he doesn't want to have. It's one of the main reasons why he left Gallifrey in the first place. He wants to be out there exploring the universe, and that's why RTD knew it was necessary to give Tennant's Doctor his own TARDIS, which also feels like it kind of defeats the purpose of retirement if he can just go off on adventures anyway. I don't know, this is why I kind of feel better about it as well, if it's like a full circle timeline rather than just a split. But I don't know. I feel like it overcomplicates things and for very little benefit, and it just feels out of character for me for the Doctor to be happy settling down. Like, you have 14 saying, "This is the happiest I've been in all my life," and it's a sweet moment, but I also can't really fully buy into that, to be perfectly honest. So it unfortunately rings a little hollow to me. I also want to touch on the Doctor getting his face back, which was obviously a bit of a mystery that was being built up. And it turns out the answer isn't to do with the Toymaker or anything. It's basically just because the Doctor is getting tired and worn out and exhausted. And okay, I can kind of buy that, but I'm not really a fan of the fact that that ultimately means, oh yeah, he did just find Donna again completely by coincidence, and there's no answer for why his clothes changed after the regeneration. And I don't know, you have a villain here that has the power to do that sort of thing, and it would have even been thematically relevant too, because back with the original Toymaker story, they were toying, pardon the pun, on using the Toymaker to change the Doctor's appearance before they came up with regeneration. That was one of the earliest regeneration concepts. So that would have been a cool way to tie into the 60th anniversary, and we know the Toymaker has that kind of power. And yeah, I don't know. I find it very underwhelming that it's just kind of, well, it just sort of happened, rather than having any sort of stronger explanation than that. And speaking of, one of the things I was very wary of with Donna coming back was how they were going to resolve the fact that if she ever remembers the Doctor, she would die. And it turns out, yep, the Star Beast was it. She just got her memories back, didn't die, let go of the meta crisis like that, and no further consequences. And I know that RTD wanted to give Donna a happy ending, and I know a lot of fans wanted that too. And I promise I'm not a sadistic guy that wants all the characters to be miserable, but I feel like if you want a happy ending, don't be shy about it. Give your characters a happy ending. That's what Chibnall did. All of his companions got off fine, and I didn't have a problem with that. What I do take issue with is when you give your characters a sad ending and then later reverse it. He already did that with Rose, and now he's done that with Donna. And for me, that just undermines the drama. It makes it feel like there will never be any consequences. Things aren't going to stick. Bad things might happen, but they're only temporary. It makes me feel like our main characters are too safe, and it makes it hard for me to become emotionally invested, because I don't believe that bad things are ever going to happen to them, or bad things will ever stick. And that's the thing. Even with the Chibnall era companions, they didn't get bad endings, but I was still invested because they could have. Whereas with RTD, I can't feel that same kind of investment going into the new era with the new companion Ruby. Maybe something bad will happen to her, but I won't believe that it'll stick. So, it just cheapens the drama to me, cheapens the consequences, and makes it harder for me to feel engaged. And the fact that RTD has done this again here makes me feel like, okay, maybe he hasn't changed all that much as a writer. Because that was one of my major concerns going in. Since we're having a returning showrunner, I really wanted him to be different, to be changed, to not be recognizably the same writer from his first era. And on the one hand, he's brought back all of his best qualities, and that's great, but I think he's also brought back all of his worst qualities, and that concerns me going forward. But, as ever, we'll see. It just doesn't really encourage me, and despite being a happy ending, left me underwhelmed and a bit disappointed, because I don't know, it felt like to me, well, now we're back in an era where there aren't really as high of stakes, which is a shame in my opinion. That being said, while I do take issue with that, on the whole, this episode was really good. I had a great time with it. The Toymaker was fantastic. Shudigatwa was great. It was a great start for him, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he develops the role in the future. And it was ultimately a very good time despite my issues with it. So I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as Wild Blue Yonder, but I definitely enjoyed it more than the Star Beast. And I'm going to be giving it an 8.5 out of 10. If you want to compare it to previous regeneration stories, I think that would put it fourth or fifth, somewhere around there. So it's decently high up there, and indeed I do think it is a better final outing for David Tennant than The End of Time was. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I had my issues, but on the whole, it was quite an enjoyable episode. There was a lot of really good stuff in there. And we'll be back in just a couple of weeks with Shudigawa's full debut with The Church on Ruby Road. So with that, please let me know your thoughts on the Giggle down in the comments below, and I'll see you all at Christmas.